Each question will be around 5 minutes, but like she said, the chat is open for any additional questions for us to get to. So to start, I would like all the panelists to share a brief overview of how you ended up in your current position.
All right. I
Oh
guess
yeah, go ahead.
I can introduce Rob. Um, hi, Alex Katz here, Director of Labor and Human Rights at Fanatics. I got into this line of work. Well, I found out about it when I was a senior at ILR and I took a corporate social responsibility class with Professor Lance Klumpa. Um, to be honest, I was struggling to find an application for my degree, but I always was interested in the international and comparative labor classes within the school. And when I took that class, there was a section on global workplace monitoring, which was a super cool industry. It sounded incredibly exotic. You know, companies from around the world were hiring consulting firms to conduct these labor audits at the factors that made their stuff for them, whether apparel, electronics, ingredients in food supply chains. And he invited a master's student who was taking a class with him at the time to give a talk. I connected with her, and yeah, it really shows you the power of networking by staying in touch. I applied for a job at her firm. They hired me. I started off as an auditor right out of school. And from there, stuck within the industry, ended up at a nonprofit that did a lot of the same things as the consulting firm that I was working for, but more on the advisory side. So advising companies on how to monitor their supply chains. And from there, I went back to the private sector in-house at Patagonia, and now with Fanatics doing much of the same thing. Yeah, each different place had a different flavor to it, a different speed. I'm very happy where I am now, but I cherish each place that I have worked at, particularly the ability to expand networks from moving from the private sector to the nonprofit world and then back.
Thanks, Alex. So I actually have no idea how I got to where I am, and because after getting my MPA, I just felt like I needed to be in New York City, and I wanted to work for government, and I wasn't sure what that really meant, and only when you start working in whatever industry do you really get a flavor of what it's like. It's kind of reading about it's very different when you get in because once you get in, there's different cultures and dynamics that you're trying to figure out. So, going to New York City, I had two final interviews, and we were going to move there no matter what. So I was hoping that one of these two panned out. One of them was the Office of Management and Budget, big influence in city government, the mayor's office, and then the other one was Department of Parks, which I was just kind of like, that's my backup plan. I hope I don't get that one. I really want the Office of Management Budget. End up getting Parks, and till this day, super grateful that I ended up at Parks because I did go to OMB after, but I jumped to a higher position back at Parks because of the connections I made, which was super beneficial and sort of landed into the budgeting and finance world, which in the city of New York, it's a big city, but it's a small budget group that we kind of all know each other. So can't tell you how I got here, but the trajectory was definitely fast to where I am now, and I think it was based on those connections.
That's great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and for the opportunity to chat with you all. My name is Jack, and similar to Rob, I had a circuitous career path as well. Just briefly, post-college, I served in AmeriCorps for 2 terms. I worked in a nonprofit food justice space, and I also farmed. So the food system was really kind of where I started looking at the problem of waste. And I was just struck by how much waste was created throughout the system. So that's when I decided to get my master's at Cornell to take on a lens, more of an academic lens of the system itself, with waste and in the built environment. And I've since applied those learnings to state and local government. I was a sustainability consultant for more than 5 years, including for a zero waste consulting startup. And now I lead the strategy and drive the execution for Estee Lauder's global zero waste programming.
Great. Thank you all for answering. It seems like a lot of this has to do with like leaning on your network that you got from Cornell and taking the chance to really get out in these places, whether it is like Robert was talking about being so adamant about going to New York City and just the groups that you meet in the work that you do. And so that ties us to our next question of what drew you to a career focused on social impact. I wanted to first direct this to Jack because it seemed like a lot of your work right after Cornell was really contingent on your thesis, which led you to Vermont under Bernie. So I was wondering if you could explain more about your interests.
Yeah, well, I mean, deciding to have a career on social impact, I think started well before that. I grew up basically playing in the woods, creating worlds. I was an only child. And I really felt a sense of peace in nature. It always sort of felt like a home to me. So when I got older and I started seeing how adults were creating their own worlds, often in opposition to the natural one or trying to control nature and the environment in some way, my heart just really couldn't handle it. It honestly still can't. So I don't know that I would be able to live with myself if I didn't have a career where I was working towards reducing the negative impacts that our society puts on the environment. Yeah, so the thesis piece was directly in line with all of that. I from Masters of City and Regional Planning, I really wanted to dive into how communities can create solutions for wicked problems. And that's sort of how I started studying the universal recycling law that was in Vermont. I focused my thesis on that in the multi-governance structure. I got to meet a lot of great players in the state, and that is how I got my first job out of Cornell.
How about either Rob or Alex? What really like drove you in your mission towards social impact?
I'll defer to you, Robert.
It was wanting to make an impact where I grew up, so New York City, and it there's maybe a theme here. I wasn't sure really how or what it was going to look like. I just knew I wanted to get my foot in the door and figure out like what can I do? And interestingly enough, I know I mentioned earlier, I was like, no parks or none of that. And just looking back, I just thought how silly that was because as a New Yorker, a park is like your backyard, right? For most New Yorkers. And even during the pandemic, that was, you know, 10x of that. That became, and everyone was the same there. And then just to see the inner workings of that, I mean, it's just been big time fulfilling for me. So I don't have a great answer on how I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to figure that out in New York City and just although it may not seem like your first choice is like the best choice sometimes, just looking back, I know that's probably, you hear that often, right? Looking back, you can see how it all ties out. So it just ended up working really, really well.
Yeah. My grandfather was a labor lawyer during the Great Depression, and he had amazing stories. And he was this like honorable figure who, like on more than one occasion, was confronted with, I guess you could say, corrupt individuals, but he remained stoic and like really dedicated to his principles. And that had a big impact on me when I was looking for a college. And in ILR, I found a place where I didn't need to do a lot of math and science and could focus on, the stuff that I was better at. um, and like I mentioned before, the classes with an international focus were really interesting to me. And I found what I think is a great niche where business can be a force for good. So I found a lot of, um, I don't know, energy and room for growth. And it turns out, I graduated in '08, which was a very tough economic time. But I entered an industry that was burgeoning because there was a lot of attention being paid to um, bad labor issues and supply chains around the world. So that's been, I guess, the vein running through my career is the type of work that I do is good for business. I would say the same is true for what Jack does.
Thank you guys. It seems like a lot of you guys carry this sort of like ethos of service before self in the type of work that you do. And I know I found it like a bit difficult as an undergraduate myself, being surrounded by this like pre-professional atmosphere where it seems like most people just try to go for jobs that are more financially stable in a sense rather than aligned with their passions and values. And so I guess as a follow-up to that is like, what sort of advice would you give like your younger self or even students that are interested in going into more of an unorthodox approach, post-grad that is more aligned with their like values and like making an impact in whatever sector they're interested in, whether it's healthcare, education, whatnot.
I feel like life has so many trade-offs and so early on to figure that out. I think it's easy to say I'm going to chase the money, which makes sense, right? I think for a lot of people it's important. That goes away pretty quick. I'll speak for myself. Can go away pretty quickly when you're trying to find kind of some balance. And I don't think you're going to be completely balanced, right? Things are always going to be. Uh, but I think you figure out pretty quickly what's important to you, whether that's time for your family or just time for the hobbies that you really like. And it's not that some of these jobs are not well paying. It's that it's just different, right? What are the trade-offs that you want to make? And so I early on you just have to start really be real with yourself and figure out like what is important to you. Is it time? Is it money? Is it like your hobby? Like what of that all those options make the most sense to you? And then start laying out what you like. And it's not bad, right? If that's the way you want to go, that's great. But just figuring that out, really having a frank conversation with yourself and family and all those counselors.
Yeah, I would add to what Rob was mentioning is that it is all a balance, and the balance is gonna shift every year, month, couple of years. So, what's going to be super important to you if going out of the gate is job security and getting your feet wet into an industry, then take it. That's totally fine. Then you're going to learn that the job is more than the tasks. It also includes the people that you work with, the culture of the business itself, whether or not you feel that you can influence that culture, or if you're being gobbled up by it. These are things that in every career step that I've taken, it's helped me hone that list of priorities of things that are nice to haves, must haves, and certainly cannot haves. And I've turned down job opportunities that were great paying, seemed great on the face of it, but I just had a feeling that the culture wasn't a right fit for me or the team wasn't a right fit for me. So I think one piece of advice that I would give to you all that I wish someone gave to me or that I'd listened was really to, and this might be a little woo woo, but to really take the time right now to understand yourself on a deeper level, to tap into whether that's, breath work, meditation, doing some type of understanding what your intuition is telling you versus what fear is telling you. I think some of the decisions that I made were more fear based, and looking back on it, I wish that I had tapped into my intuition more to be able to make some of those decisions. And I'm trying to do that work now, but with a baby and home renovations and a full-time job and a dog, there's not much room for self-discovery. So while you're in school, it's a great time.
Yeah, let me see what I can add to what Jack and Rob said. The most important elements of work that I've learned over time haven't necessarily been about the industry. It's been about more general things that work no matter what you do. So, looking for opportunities that are going to teach you a lot early on, saying yes more than you say no. And maybe to sum up very, very, very simply what Rob and Jack were saying, it's not to put too much pressure on yourself to land at the perfect place because we idealize a lot when we're younger and then face the realities of the world later on. And sometimes it can be, a lot of disappointment. I'll tell you from just the last two, the current company I work for and the last one, Patagonia is like a nonprofit. It's a private company that's like a nonprofit. A lot of people come there, their first jobs out of school, and they think they're in some like oasis, like a magical place where the ills of the world don't exist. But they do. They do everywhere. And to come to Patagonia after working elsewhere feels really great. If you want to be treated well, it's a great place to be. If you faced other pressures and other businesses and come there, things are done differently. So I think it's important to have a really rounded experience and not be afraid to make changes, and just make sure you're putting yourself in a position where you're learning.
Great. Thank you all so much. Given the fact that there's just so many sectors out there, based on your experience, how would you guys compare working in government, nonprofits, and socially responsible private companies? Jacqueline, you've worked in all three, so could you shine a light on the differences you've seen amongst them?
Sure. Yeah. I know we were talking about this beforehand that we've all kind of dabbled into different spaces. So I'm interested to hear Alex and Rob's view on this too. But I think my quick analysis in comparing the three, and I actually went into it wanting to get an experience with all three because working in one, you have partners in the others, and you kind of like the grass seems like it's always greener. And then you get there and you're like, that grass was really green. Why did I hop over? So anyway, quick analysis is that the nonprofit gave me the largest sense of pride. The impact is direct. You get to see it, taste it, smell it, for better or worse. Like you are on the ground, or at least this is my experience. However, depending on where you're getting your funding, a lot of your time could be spent applying for grants or responding to the grantees to kind of make a case for why your job should exist in the first place. So it adds a certain level of stress there. And if you're looking for something that's really financially secure, to build a family with or something like that, there are certainly limitations within some nonprofit spaces, not all. Within government, I'll preface to say that my government experience was working in Vermont under Bernie Sanders, so that was different than other experiences. But I definitely felt that it was slow. Progress was slower than I would have anticipated. The ideas and the heart and the values were really aligned with whom I was working with, but the bureaucracy really slowed down progress. So patience is a virtue and persistence is key. And yeah, I haven't worked in government since 2018, so it probably looks very different now. Private, which is where I am right now, I would say it really depends on the culture of the company that you work for. The pace could be fast or it could be slow, depending on the governance structure that you have to fall within and how many flags you have to run up the flag, or, whatever the saying is. But basically you could have the budget or not to get things done. You could have people roll their eyes at you when you come in and say that you want to work on a sustainability project, even though that's not their space, or you could have leadership behind you. So I think it really depends on the culture of the workplace that you're in. I think from my experience, job security was higher in private, but that, these days it might not be any different from government or nonprofit as well. I think in private, I've come across the most resistance internally. So with that, if you're planning to go in private and your company is not Patagonia, then you're going to have to build collaborative relationships, taking a course on negotiation or coming, multi-communication, things like that, I think would be really important to try and just bring the company together around your values of what you're trying to do. And that could take time too. So.
Yeah, I think from what Jack was saying, the pace is I think what defines each step in my career and the differences between consulting, which is the fastest pace, nonprofit, a bit slower, and then where I'm at now, somewhere in the middle, back in the private sector. It's just a matter of preference, I suppose, and what type of security you're looking for. I feel like the transition from consulting to the nonprofit world was super important for me. Technically, I was able to do more like academic focused work when I was working for a nonprofit. I worked on revising the nonprofit's international labor standard that factories were audited against, which was a year-long process that was done with a committee dedicated to that and consisted of like piloting the standard in the field, testing it, making revisions. And while there, I worked on an approach for calculating the living wage, which has been extremely important to my career and led me to my job at Patagonia, where I was hired to run that program. Um, but I wouldn't have had that opportunity in the private sector. The projects that I was running at the nonprofit were much longer term in nature, and that was okay. They were government funded. The return on investment there wasn't as much pressure on that. And then coming back to the corporate world after that was wonderful. I got to implement the type of things that I had been researching previously. Um, yeah, and just the expansion of networks is great. I wouldn't have been exposed to other nonprofits or government agencies, US and international, if I hadn't taken that stop in the nonprofit sector.
I guess I'll just add specifically for New York City, government, there's a lot of red tape. And it's not that folks don't want to think creatively, it's that sometimes they're kind of in a box of like these are your parameters and they're kind of just moving around within it. And so EDC, where I work now, it's very interesting because it's not like your traditional nonprofit because we're asset owners who really own assets on behalf of the city, but we collect rent, we own the ferry system. So there's like a lot of land that we own. That's how our revenue generation comes. But we also work closely with the city, and that's a big part of my job, which is fascinating because going from one to the other, it's just sort of surprising because you're really just asking questions that seem so simple to your government counterparts that it's not that they're not trained to think that way. So it could be that there's just like, oh, I didn't know that. So I kind of have this mantra to my team. If it's not mandated, policy can change. You can shift, you can move things around if it's not an official law. And so we've learned to push the issue and have people ask the right questions when we're talking to government. So, it's not that one is better than the other. I definitely now at this juncture would not go back to city government after being at EDC. It is just a ton of passionate, just such reach of all the impact that EDC has in New York City. So, but had good experience in both.
Yeah. So when it comes to, I guess, like getting your foot in the door, what opportunities did you guys all take advantage of during your Cornell experience that helped you set up yourself for or helped you advance in this career of public service? Were there specific skills that you acquired? Were there specific opportunities that you guys like sought out for in your early career experiences? I know some of you guys talked about tapping in your like network, talking to professors. What other things or avenues did you find very helpful?
I can start just briefly. I found being a part of student-run organizations incredibly helpful. I thought that I took time between undergrad and grad school to work. But at the same time, a lot of the things that I was learning while I was at Cornell, I didn't have the opportunity to play out in a more professional setting. So I led a couple of projects through through a student-led group called Design Connect. And that was a way for me to kind of take the learnings from the classes and immediately put it into the community to see how it felt, which I think I would definitely recommend. And I would also say take courses in other groups outside, I mean, we were just talking about that there's more flexibility perhaps today than there was in the past, but my program had pretty flexible requirements. So I took some courses in the ag school, I took some courses in finance, I took some courses in economics, and obviously city and regional planning, but I was trying to kind of have a holistic view, because when you enter the workforce as a social impact or sustainability person, um, it's always going to be helpful to know a little bit about negotiation or finance, because it just enables you to make different connections with folks who have a different value system than you might.
I know
Yeah.
that personally. Oops, sorry.
I
I know
don't
that
have a
pers
whole lot to add. Yeah, I just wanted to mention again the class that I took with Lance Compa, corporate social responsibility, was key in introducing me to the field that I now work in. And he was incredibly generous with his time, interested in getting students into that line of work. And you'll be surprised of the connections that folks have. I mean, he was involved in NAFTA negotiations in 1994. The network that he has is huge. So I always found that to be super unique and valuable.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I can attest, like as like a current Cornell student of just the classes within itself. Like my college, the Brooks School of Public Policy, has a lot of like engaged learning components. So I took a refugee resettlement class where we were able to visit a lot of like the agencies in upstate New York. And so that was like a huge catalyst for me in getting my foot in the door at the US Senate, where I focused a lot on refugee like policy, and got my hands dirty with it because I was able to see these on the ground realities. And then I guess just connecting out of like the Cornell bubble. Like there is a nonprofit nearby here that does informal refugee resettlement. Ithaca welcomes refugees. I was able to basically get a lot of like money through the Einhorn Center, to create my own like program with them, and basically provide a lot of the students like books, school supplies, and laptop computers to help them in their education journey. And so I think these formative moments that you have in undergrad, your master's program, just by like learning these concepts and like being able to access all these opportunities help, I guess, your future trajectory in terms of like really what you want to do.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Um, so as a senior myself, I'm at this crossroad of what am I going to do post grad? And so I know Robert, you have your MPA, Jacqueline, you got your MRP. So, how did you decide whether to pursue graduate school?
Probably because so my path was I was going to go to law school. I took the LSAT and was getting ready to submit my applications, and then I kind of had the one of these moments. It's like because I wanted to whenever I would get asked the question, "What do you want to do?" I was like, I want to do something good for the community. So as a political science undergrad, you just kind of walk into law, and I was like, I'll figure it out what that good means. And then before submitting my first application, I just had this moment like this, what am I doing? And is this what I really want to do? And then Sarah, my wife, she had asked, have you ever looked into an MPA? And so like, I don't know what that is. And so at some point, I looked into it, shifted gears within a few weeks. GRE exam was open. Like I just went, took it, and then there started my journey. So it was one of those things where I always wanted to have an impact in my community or just do good. I just wasn't sure what was going to take me there. And I think a moment of pause, of asking good questions, having the right people around you to be your challenge network or just to bring up ideas that you may have not considered is really important. And really listening, I think, is key because sometimes it's just tunnel vision, right? I'm going to do this and I'm going to go, go, go. but allowing yourself a moment of pause. And what have people been saying? What have been the things that have been kind of been landing and giving me sort of indication to think otherwise, or just to think through it a little bit more. So and then MPA turned out to be the best route for me personally.
I love that, Rob, that your challenge network. That is very true because you can have the folks who will just yes you, or you can have the folks who will give you their honest opinion and you trust it. That's great. For me personally, I mentioned this. I graduated in my undergrad in '08 and I didn't start until 2014. So I took 6 years off in between and I did 2 years of AmeriCorps. Um, and I really did that because I had the opportunity to go into a role right off the gate of graduating undergrad from an internship, but I wasn't feeling it. I really wanted to kind of expand my horizons a little bit. And I don't know who I would be if I did not explore public service and do that for a couple of years. So I decided to take time in between because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I just knew that eventually I would probably go back to school. Um, and similar to Rob, I had a moment where I applied a couple years later. I got into a program, and as I was about to submit my acceptance, it's like, no, I can't. It didn't feel right. So then a couple years later, I uh, applied again. The first time I would have gone to Tufts. This time I went to Cornell, and just like it just felt right to me. So definitely slowing down, listening to your body, and yeah, I would say if you have, if there are other seniors out there who, if going into a grad program feels more safe for you, I might recommend that you hold off and try and learn something about why there might be fear around entering the workforce, because delaying confronting a fear only makes its power grow. And sometimes going into the workforce is really the best way to learn about what you actually want to do with your life.
Phenomenal. Thank you guys so much for your valuable insights. Um, Now I wanted to probe more on advice that you would give to students who hope to enter government, nonprofit, or even mission-driven private sector roles. Alex, I know you have a lot of like private sector experience as well as more of this like social impact. Could you expand more on like some sort of advice for students who are interested in this landscape?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully my advice is more general, so that no matter where you go, there's something to take from it. I think being prepared for your interaction with folks who work for the organizations you're interested in is really important. So understanding the history of the work that takes place there, the backgrounds of the people you're speaking to. Um, like at Fanatics, for example, if I'm interviewing someone on my team, I want them to have done the research, to have read our annual impact reports and know that we're a Fair Labor Association accredited member, what that means. That goes a long way. Just being prepared for the interview, showing that you are interested, that you care, that it means something to you is really important. And being able to identify potentially even pain points for the organization, the things that you might need to work on. I remember I did terrible in an interview with Apple. I was asked, what would I focus on if I were to run their labor monitoring program? And I was really young and I had no idea how much I didn't know at the time. And thinking back on my answer, I'm like, oh my God, that was terrible. Like I identified something that now I know was not an issue for them at the time and still isn't. Um, but I had prepped, just hadn't put a lot of thought into that question. And it's really important in the working world is to anticipate the type of questions you get from executives to continue to synthesize what you know as simple as possible, but be prepared for the questions you'll most likely get that are challenging.
Great. Thank you so much. And I know a lot of you guys on the panel who've had government experience, as mentioned that it's very different back then versus how it is now. So I guess I wanted to ask, like, how can students best plan for a socially conscious career amid changing policies?
I I wouldn't worry too much because policy is always going to change. I think it's just going to be a constant. I think it's just whatever the news is throwing at you today. I think you stay hyper focused on what you want to do. Like, so I wanted to go to New York City and I wanted to make a difference. So somehow that ends up working out, right? As long as you just keep doing what your trajectory is telling you to go. But I don't put too much, in my opinion, don't put too much weight into that because that can paralyze you, and it's just not good. It just keep going. Things open up. I mean, Alex, I think you said you 2008 during the financial crisis. I mean, look where you are now. So I just think you just keep going.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the last year, there have been certain agencies and sectors that just you can't apply for jobs of them anymore. USAID, for example, right? So USAID gone, and organizations that received funding from USAID don't operate. So it's important to think about where you're going and how stable that organization is. You can find out a lot about prospects of companies and where you'll have stronger security. I was asking Jack and Rob if they've ever worked in DC under, changing presidents, because I know that folks who do work for certain agencies often leave as the administration changes over. Um, but yeah, a lot has changed. I mean, in the apparel sector now, we're dealing with the ramifications of tariffs, and every day is it's wild. There's so much changing constantly. Um, my job is secure. In fact, I have job security because of all that fluidity globally in supply chains. But it doesn't make things easy. It makes things extremely difficult and perilous at times. Um, but yeah, I think to Rob's point, you shouldn't put too much pressure on yourself about that, but just be aware of what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the only thing that I think I would add to this is one of the biggest drivers of positive change within my career path was being adaptable to unforeseen or foreseen circumstances, but kind of seeing what's happening and asking, okay, what's next? How do I adjust? It's never like, I mean, you can sit and worry if you want, but you could also take the energy and think about the next step. Where should I be focusing my energy on learning this? Or I need to connect with this person from this department because now I see our roles being more collaborative potentially, or it could be really contentious. So let me get ahead of it. So I think the critical thinking skills that you have learned during your time at Cornell will serve you well, I think, in any changing of guard. So have confidence in yourself that you can navigate it because you will.
On this notion of perseverance, I wanted to ask all of you guys, like, what is one of the biggest challenges that you faced in your current work, and how did you navigate it?
I think probably two components to this, but I think if you think you enjoy managing, you got to think about that really long and hard because managing teams is not easy. At least I'll speak for myself. There's a lot of external dynamics that are difficult that I have to navigate. But getting teams on the same page for a common goal and also to create efficiencies to make the organization better, there's always going to be gaps in processes, and you continually auditing your system like that is a big churn, and you're dealing with personalities, you're dealing with different people and just dynamics, people feeling pressure from different groups, and so you trying to stay calm and steady, always steady, and navigating through those things. You can find some big wins, but it's definitely challenging. It is not for the faint of heart, because it requires resilience. It requires um, over communicating, ensure things will get better. You just got to give it time. I remember coming into EDC and there was at least my team, there's a lot of gaps. A few people had left, and I asked all the SVPs at the time, what is your feedback? And there was a lot of feedback. And then within a month, people were still coming. It's like, what happened? Why haven't things changed? So I told them, you need to give me 4 to 6 months, and if you haven't seen an improvement, like come back to me. There has been a complete culture shift in how things were run, where it just takes time, and you're going to feel that pressure. So that's one of the big things, at least for me personally, just the management of getting things to work requires a lot.
I will echo what you said, Rob, about being calm. Even if you want to scream and you agree with all the things that your team is bringing towards you that is frustrating you, um, acknowledging that that's really frustrating and remaining calm will help them calm down, and it will help them regulate their nervous system, because as much as, I mean, you have a newborn, they don't regulate their own nervous systems, and teams need help with that too sometimes, especially in the face of a lot of changes. I think one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing in my current role, I'm sure you've heard the news, Estee Lauder Companies has been not doing well financially for the last couple of years. Really, since COVID, it's been struggling because of business opportunities and decisions that were made regarding diversification of markets that are not in my area, but I'm still very much impacted by it. I came back from maternity leave and half of my team was gone. And we're still dealing with the ramifications of having way fewer people to do the same work. So I'm currently navigating it, but I will say prioritizing what is most important, what's most impactful. There were a lot of projects that we had to put aside that we're not going to focus on, because we're 80/20. We're going to put 20% of our effort or whatever towards the thing that's going to get us 80% impact. And really, really being honest with, this is a moment in time. We're going to start working on this. We're going to do it together, because then we can complete that and work towards something else. So I think having that long-term mindset, I think Alex mentioned that, is helpful. And yes, definitely staying calm amid whatever challenges you are facing.
Yeah, for me, I've had the same challenge my entire career. I've just gotten a little bit better at dealing with it, which is, how do you make decisions when there's a lot that's going wrong? So in my line of work, we are checking out whether factories are meeting our standards. And if a factory is not meeting our standards, what is our tolerance for how far below the requirements they are? And how does that balance with the need for this supplier, from the sourcing and other teams? To navigate those conversations, at first, I was looking for a playbook, and I just wanted to repeat what I had been taught. And over time, as I worked with more and more people with a lot more experience, I realized that there isn't always a playbook for everything. You just have to use your skill to be creative, but frame decisions the right way so that you're aligned among different departments that you work with. Um, so yeah, I've got those issues constantly. And I'm very lucky that over time I've found that, I've stopped applying for jobs at companies and started applying for jobs with managers. I want to learn from the person who's managing me. That's going to get more difficult over time as you move up, when executives don't have as much time to develop you. But earlier in your career, it's so important. I had not so great managers, and I currently work for somebody that's teaching me the most. So I'm very happy about that. But decision making, it comes with the territory. You advance in your career, you have to do it more often, and you have to get comfortable stepping outside of some procedure and instead thinking, how do I make this work given the situation I'm dealing with today?
Great. Thank you guys so much. I've noticed a lot of themes of just communication. You're going to be working with people from all walks of life, and just making sure that you are able to have this constant learning opportunity with the people that you surround yourself with. Question, feel free to come off mute and ask, or you can type whatever you are interested in the chat.
Okay, cool. So hi, my name is Paul. I'm a second year MPA student. I am kind of a negotiator by trade. I'm a certified negotiator. Last year, I founded the Cornell Negotiation Student Society. I teach negotiation skills there to other students, and I lead a team to expand like programs that we have. We have a certificate program, a leadership program, a podcast program, and more. So it did resonate a lot with me when you guys were talking about like being frustrated at times when you're going through growing pains to either like expanding or contracting, and your team remaining the same size or even changing has to adapt to that, and that's uncomfortable. Um, but my question tonight is more about identifying something in a job that you are looking at or prospecting. So, how did you identify or how are you identifying like basic skills that you are obsessed with that will come up in a role that you might want that's only adjacently related? For example, I love negotiation and government affairs. Sometimes it's difficult to know if a job that's like being a policy analyst or something similar might be fulfilling, and I might be able to apply all the things that I'm so passionate about.
Very good question. Hi, Paul. I think number one, I think everyone should join your negotiations group. Um, to answer your question slightly, if I don't know at what point is this during the application process, because in my opinion, I think you should always just apply. If you get to the point of where you have an interview, ask the question. Say, I'm really interested in X, Y, and Z. Is there an opportunity for me to flex those skills within this role, or do you think that's something that I could build into? I think if you have done your due diligence on researching that group, you might even be able to tell them, I've seen the work that you do, and it seems to me that negotiation or whatever the specific thing is would be really beneficial in this area of your work. Is that so? If so, I would love to, discuss bringing that to the table, because it might be something that the interviewer, as someone who recently hired, having good questions like that will give you it will first off answer your question, hopefully. But it will also give you a better stance, I believe, in the lineup of applicants.
Yeah, and I would just add that at least the postings that I've seen, you're probably going to be more confused than actually understand what the postings are, because there's just so much information, right? We want the perfect candidate, and a lot of places it's a weeding out process, right? If you're already not feeling comfortable or confident applying, then that they've done their job really. And so I agree where going into the interview, if you feel like that's the organization for you, asking the questions and feeling out that manager that you're going to work with, or how you can get a lot, but asking really good questions, because I am actually surprised at how few questions, if it gets to me, I get asked, or just the types of questions where it's like, this is your opportunity. Like you got this far, and sometimes it's a little bit disappointing, but you know, thinking through what that question is.
I would have loved to have you on my collective bargaining team when I was taking that class at ILR. Man, maybe I would have been in a better state than I am now if I had a better grade in that class. But yeah, that was a beautifully asked question. I was intimidated when you were asking it, and I'm glad that Jack and Rob went first. But I do think that Yeah, the answer lies in the interview process because, as Rob mentioned, job postings are kind of boilerplate at times, and yeah, pretty confusing and have a lot of technical jargon built in. I think if you're asking about the skills that the hiring manager is looking for in the person and also the trajectory of the role, like what's the upward trajectory, what are the possibilities over time, you might have a feel for what you're looking for.
To have a question. My name is Hassan. I just want to know how important you think your grades are. You know, back in grad school, I want to know how important you think your academic life was in relation to your current role. And I just also want to know if you were back in grad school today, what exactly are you going to focus on? Like, what are the key things that you're going to focus on for the next 2 years?
I would focus on, because I'm almost thinking you're 10 years down the road self this has been a theme, but communication only gets more important as time goes on because when you're at different tables, your ability to convey information to a CEO or a first deputy mayor um, becomes that much more important. And um, figure and being okay with public speaking and even figuring out how many it's an art really to go into a room, even noticing. I remember taking we had a consultant come in and talk about if you're too facing forward, your breathing is off and like you're more tense, it's almost like you have to sit back a little bit, not too casual, and it kind of flows in and be excited, right? So it's almost this communication thing that I feel like is, I won't talk about grades. I'll leave that. I don't, but what I will say is communication. Because at some point, let's say you go to budgeting or finance, you can learn all the spreadsheets and things that go. That takes a little bit, but if you want to keep moving up, it's communication is a huge key. And also, how do you see problems? Are you the one always trying to asking others to get out of the problem? Or are you bringing solutions to the problem? It's just a combo of both.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'll touch on the grades thing, which I hope it's okay for me to say. I don't look at the grades. In my opinion, it's, do you have the skills needed to do the job? Did you absorb the concepts from your coursework so that you can come to the interview and show that you have a general understanding and a working knowledge, or at least a strong interest and ability to learn? So I, yeah, that's what I would say. I also feel like during my time at Cornell, and maybe this was just me taking on too many things, but I learned prioritization more so than anything else, because often the amount of work that you are given is just not feasible to complete everything. So you have to prioritize what are the things that are going to be, what are the things that you're most interested in? What are the things that are going to help you get to the next step within that class or next semester? But it's not to just check all the boxes and complete every assignment perfectly and not sleep. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much for being such good participants, as well as our lovely panelists for providing your lovely insight. I just wanted to extend a thank you so much for everything that you guys have done over the course of this hour. And I'm now going to hand it off to Krista.
Thank you all for this wonderful event tonight. We're going to drop in the chat some links to UConnect communities in career services where you can explore different pathways to different careers with some job postings and events that are applicable to careers in different areas of social good. We'll also But thank you so much to the panelists and to Ariella. It was a great opportunity to hear from all of you and to kind of help students find on-ramps into careers that aren't always the easiest way to navigate. So thank you all.